Okay, so we've been going with Operation Ideal since 2011, and as John says, we've started off really with veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan, but we have had Falklands War veterans, so going right back, people involved in Banner in Northern Ireland. I think our oldest visit to any of our sites has, of course, been Cecil, who many of you know. So we've had a Second World War veteran on site, which is wonderful to see. And it might sound counterintuitive to think about doing archaeology of Second World War items as a means of recovery or therapy, for whatever you want to call it, for people who've been maybe traumatized in conflict zones. But actually it works pretty well because the participants really do recognize some of the items. They will empathize with the feelings or the emotions of those that were here in the 1940s. And also their knowledge base is way better than mine as a prehistoric archaeologist, to be able to tell me exactly what things are going on. I mean, they can make stuff up, I probably believe it, but they can bring genuine knowledge and genuine skills to that particular picture. And having worked with the military people over the years, there's such a skill set that they possess, be it appreciating topography, being able to dig is perhaps, and bringing all the skills that founded British archaeology in many ways. It's not a coincidence that so many of archaeologists in Britain at the start were military figures. You think of Pitt Rivers, or Lieutenant General, as he was called in the military. Mortimer Wheeler, Brigadier Mortimer Wheeler, Military Cross winner. Lawrence of Arabia, very famous military figure, but he did his degree in Crusader castles out in the area that he would later become a very famous military figure in. So there are all these things. Just think of mapping, ordnance survey. Well, ordnance is the clue there. Metal detecting, from minesweeping, things like that. So there's lots of skills that these individuals bring. So the military projects actually do bring along. Hopefully throughout the night, you'll see one of the other reasons doing military archaeology is that you do find things. Roman sites and military sites, they're the places you will always make finds. Making finds is an important thing because a bored soldier is a dangerous thing and very inventive, not necessarily in a good way. So finding things is really, really important. Military sites will give you that. Unlike Roman sites and prehistoric sites, you can quite often get names, families, pictures of those individuals involved when you work on Second War sites. So that was really key to one of the reasons that we're doing this. You all know this being locals, but you can't move around here for mentions of this particular unit. 506 Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 101st Airborne, and in particular, Easy Company of that lot. There are books written by a large number of them, people like Don Malarkey. You've got Dick Winters, obviously wrote a fair amount about it as well. There is the very famous book by Stephen Ambrose and the television series based on that particular subject. If you were in Fox Company, you did exactly the same as Easy Company, but nobody's ever heard of you because there's no TV series and no book. You'd be livid, wouldn't you? This project actually came around through a discussion with Roger. Actually, we were looking around. I was looking around with Roger Day for a site to look at an excavation of a B-17 bomber, and there were a few that crashed near here. One that crashes as a result of the raid on Schweinfurt, the ball bearings factory over in Germany, and we couldn't find the particular location. It was going to be a very tricky excavation to organise for many reasons. And Roger said to me, why don't you just come to Littlecote House, where there's an actual exhibition on something else I'm interested in, which is the 101st Airborne. And I said, well, why are you interested in that? He goes, well, they were based here. And very ignorant prehistorian, I had not a clue. But he showed me things like his guided walks that were put together with very generous grants. And from that, the project really came together. I'm just trying to get the slides on. Let's try it. Seems to have frozen. Where are we? That's working. Good. So you know this. You know that there are references throughout your beautiful village to the presence of this particular unit of the 506 Parachute Infantry Regiment. So we came here in 2018 actually to do some surveying work, because like all good archaeology, you don't start by sticking a spade into the ground, no matter what telly might have you believe. You have to do a lot of research, desktop research, and doing research on the Second World Project is no different to doing prehistoric archaeology. You have to do the same desktop before you start any of the field work. So we started it as a possible one for Operation Nightingale, and to see what else we could do. Also, you make use of the logistics locally. Very important, especially when they're themed with Band of Brothers. I mean, the room we're in, being able to watch the TV series with the actors in here on the floor that the Americans replaced. Wonderful opportunity. Having something like the post office, where famously Dick Winters was billeted in the Second World War, also being able to provide us with lardy cake and other delicacies. It's something that the Americans do like coming back and trying. Lardy cake was almost as popular as Aspel's. Almost. Now, when you start with an archaeological project, you always start with a map. Normally with an ordnance survey map, but I think this is rather special. We've had so many local experts that have been really generous with their time and their knowledge, and Neil Stevens and his brother have been, a really great help when we've done this, producing things like this. I rather like this map of Wiltshire, and I think I'd like to use this more often when we talk about Wiltshire from the American presence. And you can see just how important it was. You have Swindon at the top, and they did have activities connected with Swindon. I might mention that, depending on how polite I'm feeling later on. Chiseldon, where there's a big army camp. Then, of course, your wonderful village of Aldbourne. Ramsbury, where a lot of the companies were based, including Dog Company. Then you've got Chilton Foliot in the bottom right, which is where the parachute jump school was. And then you've got the real pressure on the pubs. I call this project Oversexed, Overpaid and Under Aldbourne, because I think it must have been a huge surprise for many people throughout Britain when this friendly invasion took place. And you look at the handbooks given to American service personnel about what they should and shouldn't say when they come to Britain. I think we should still use it where the modern veterans come over as well. I think it'd be very helpful for Ken and Pat if they're listening. And you see, trying to get to the bar and being greeted by quotes, bloody Yanks. So the other thing we do is look at aerial photography. Very, very useful tool in archaeology to see what was potentially once there. Luckily, if you're dealing with sites of the Second World War, you can see them in built form. And the archives for all of these things, the national archives, are in Swindon, which makes it all the more easy. So we traveled up to Swindon and we looked for the records, because the American Air Force flew all over the sites they were using, partly for training and partly for their own records. Aldbourne being a case in point. So this is a photograph taken by the American Air Force, and a lot of these are now online. They were issued last year, I think it was. They were released. Your sports pitch is the pitch on the sort of middle right of the image for those looking online, but this one here. So that's the area of your now very successful football team, the Monarchs, I believe they're called. So that's the football pitch, and that was the area we particularly wanted to focus on in our excavations, if there was to be anything, and we thought about it in 2019. There's the football pitch from Google Earth in 2019 with Stephen's remaining hut here, Stephen Southey's site. The big camp of the Americans is here. If you get the right Google Earth photograph, you can still see traces of where the huts once were. The big Red Cross building is at the main joint of Farm Lane at the top. For those looking online, it's the one at the top here. So that's the site we were looking at. You've got air photographs, you've got modern air photographs, you've also got sketch maps that were produced. This was produced by one of the veterans using his memory of his encampment here at Aldbourne. On the left of the image, you've got where they recollected that Fox Company were billeted, and the famous Easy Company were more in the centre, just off the road. You've got Q, 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 ESQ, and then RX. Well, the RX is the Red Cross building, so that's like the NAFI, and that's the building we're pretty sure that Stephen's wonderful car restoration building was making use of. So that's the Red Cross building. Just above it, it says ESQ. That's the Easy Sergeant's Quonset hut. Now, a Quonset hut is a Nissen hut, but that's an American name for it. They are all Nissen huts. Cassie's done some fantastic work to bring the British history, this site was built for the British to start with. I think I'm right in saying that the Worcestershires were here at some point and some artillery. And then Q and above are Quonset huts used by Easy Company. Memory's a funny thing. It's not always 100% accurate. This was done many, many years after the war. But nonetheless, this gave us a sample of what that person could recollect. If you go around the site now, I'm sure you're familiar that there's pretty much nothing left of the original buildings. There's the building that holds your carnival bits and pieces. That's one of the original buildings. And then Stevens, although moved, has got some of the original fittings, which is really incredibly important when you're looking at what survives, and you can work out some of the nuts and bolts and the fixtures that we might be finding on site. And there have been a few cases where we've been able to recognize things in Stevens' hut as what we found on site. So that's all that survives from what was a vibrant, very busy area in the 1940s. Must have been a bit like Soweto in South Africa, one of the townships really densely populated. So looking for individuals, we mentioned individual people. Wouldn't this be wonderful if we could locate any of these? This is one of the very famous individual soldiers from Easy Company. He's the one at the front at the right, this chap here. This is First Sergeant Carwood Lipton. And if you've read the book or seen the television series, Lipton, as one of the first sergeants, is responsible for really holding that unit together under heavy pressure from the Germans in the Battle of the Bulge at a place called Bastogne and Foy. And as a result, he's given a field promotion to become a lieutenant, as the Americans call him. But that's in the front of all the sergeants of the NCOs on your football pitch at Aldbourne. Behind him is one of those Nissen huts. To the left is a more rectangular hut. That's in fact a glider crate. As it's an airborne unit, these are paratroopers, but there are airborne troops that go in the Waco gliders over into Normandy, and that's one of the things that were brought over. They brought the gliders over in, and they've reused the structure as some sort of storeroom or maybe a habitation place. And then you've got the Red Cross building on the far right. The wonderful thing about this photograph is that topography doesn't change massively. You can stand in exactly that position and take that photograph. It's pretty much on the edge of the penalty area. So do it outside a match day, and you can stand on the penalty area because the ridge line of the trees in the background, the hillside's still exactly the same shape. The beech trees are still there. So you can geolocate yourself in that position and work out where those huts could once have been. Really quite evocative thing. Again, if you've watched the television series or read the book, you're probably familiar that there was a plot against Sobel, their commanding officer, and allegedly it takes place in the sergeant's hut with all sorts of ramifications. Well, that's the sergeant's hut if we go by that sketch map that we saw earlier by the veteran. So quite an historic location. So we've got air photographs, we've got photographs of the individuals, we've got sketch maps, we've got other maps. Next stage is geophysical survey. The great thing about Time Team is I never mention or explain what this is to anybody, because I just have to talk about geophys, and you all know it produces a plot on the ground. You see somebody with a Zimmer frame or a mobile chariot like this thing going over the ground, and it produces a wonderful plot potentially with buried archaeology. Well, when we started all of this and discussions with loads of you in the room, we were worried whether there might not be anything left, because you'd had a couple of quite big events here, the Big Dig, the pitch had been leveled after all the huts had been demolished and knocked down and graded away. So there was the potential that it had all been removed, taken away. There were companies that were required to remove all these things. It might be that there was going to be nothing left below the ground. So Dave here, doing our survey from Archaeological Surveys, a fantastic surveyor, is producing what we hoped was going to be quite an illuminating plot. And of course, it does have a result, otherwise you wouldn't be sitting here tonight. So here we go. Here's the result that Dave produced. And this is what we were looking at in our very first year, is the mustard colored square at the top of the left image. The one in the red is something we came on to later on. What you're looking at is a magnetometer survey. So it's measuring the magnetic responses to the surveying equipment below the ground. Some things are better than others. If you've got floodlights that used to be on the pitch, they do give you a very good signal. So sadly, all the black and white blobs on the left are the remains of your floodlight pylons. And you've got the same on the other side as well. You can see there's a big white rectangle at the top with nothing in it. That's your football goalpost, because doing magnetometry around a big magnetic signal tends not to work particularly well. So that's the goalpost. And then there's another pipe trench running right across your football pitch here. So that is all modern. From our point of view, what was interesting was that there are elements that you should be able to see at the bottom. All these lines, they correspond with that aerial photograph that I showed you by the American Air Force as being the location where the huts once stood. So that was promising. The key thing from us from the first year was just do a very small sample and see if we could find that hut, that sergeant's hut used by Carwood Lipton and his colleagues, that's in that mustard coloured square. And can you all note the little dots, that it's almost like an L shape, loads of little circular dots within that in a rectangular form. That again seemed very promising to us. So that's what we're looking at. You can see the corresponding air photograph from the Americans on the right to compare what the buildings once looked like. So you can see there is a tally. There's something below the ground, whether it's fairly ephemeral or not, you can't tell before you put a spade in the ground. So this was our first year. We learned a lot, I think, in the first year. Partly get a turf cutter for the second year. That was a good lesson learned. Try and not be there on backfilling day was a lesson that lots of people learned, I think, as well, as another good one. Hire a steamroller and get Janine to drive it is another good lesson, because that worked phenomenally well. So first year, this is what we were encountering. So this was all done by hand. All the digging has been done by hand. In the first year, even the turf cutting was done by hand, which was, I think, emotional, to say the least. And you'll also notice that the soil at the back is really quite deep. And that's because the people that have leveled the pitch in the first instance with bulldozers or whatever have pushed a lot of the spoil up towards the bank, and that has sealed certain deposits, but it means it's quite deep. So people like Daz had to dig by hand and wheelbarrow down to quite a depth to get to the archaeology. So it's much easier on the football pitch, much shallower. The things that we were seeing, those dots in a rectangular alignment, were in fact these elements. These are all the concrete post pads onto which the Nissen hut was fixed. If you ever want to leave a geophysical trace, a concrete pad with a metal spike in the middle is the way to go, because that's what we were seeing on those surveys, and they corresponded precisely with the survey. The great thing of having a good surveyor is you can put your excavation trench, excuse me, right around the feature you want to uncover and make the lead archaeologist look competent. It's a great thing. And so Dave put us exactly in the right place. Concrete pads, the corner ones are much larger to hold the strain. That's the front door. There was a back door at the end. We didn't dig. They will still be there. We didn't examine those because it was a lot of spoil that we have had to remove to do that work. And the dark staining between it all is the remains of the tar paper to try and make a waterproof membrane or layer where the corrugated iron hits the floor, because it was a particularly nasty and wet and cold winter. You read the accounts, they do complain quite a bit about it. So that is the footprint that you've got. That's all been reburied. That's all still in the ground. And that's the same for every single hut we've looked at. All these pads and footings, they're all still there. We've not removed any of them. We've tended to stop at the top level of the surviving bits of the structure to leave your football pitch holding a really quite important historic legacy. The outline of the building on the right you can see there is taken directly from the photograph of Carwood Lipton's hut, and our photographer Harvey Mills, who's taken the majority of these wonderful photographs, has superimposed that outline on top of the footings and show it's a precise fit. So we are in exactly the right place for Lipton's building. That famous sergeant's hut does still survive just off the street. And as we're doing all this, you've got all sorts of facets. Some people are digging, some people are metal detecting, and we've got some grids I'll show you later. Others looking at the wider landscape where these Americans trained. They trained a lot locally, but they also went as far as Salisbury Plain. We know they were training at a place called Beech's Barn on the east of the main training area, probably even going through Imber when they were working alongside the armoured units prior to the invasion on the 6th of June, 44. And within these wood blocks, you will find little traces of those Americans. This is something that my colleague Dan Miles has led on for the team and brought out some really good results. The brown, I say, splodge in very archaeological terminology that you can see is the remains of a foxhole. So those are little infantry positions that have been dug by these American paratroopers as part of their training. And you look at all the things they did, from live firing points. I mean, you just go to the crown and you can see something above the fireplace that probably a relic of some of their training with the bazooka round. They are doing some live firing training. They're doing what we call dry training with practice rounds. They're testing the efficacy of foreign munitions. They're learning all these lessons prior to being dropped into the maelstrom of Normandy. Really important. When you look at what they did, this sort of thing is almost one-to-one training for when they're going through the Ardennes forest. So you've got little bits of munitions out here. You've got the physical legacy of the training trenches, and you've also got little carvings left on trees, arbor-glyphs, and they're a very personal touch. This one, CLSC USA. Carwood Lipton, USA, South Carolina. He's not from South Carolina. We did get very excited. So we don't know who did that, but it's still an American who's carved their name on the trees. And there are quite a few of these in the wood blocks around here. So there's another one here, again, 1943. So the guys are here for the longest in any one period in their military careers. They're here in Aldbourne for 9 months. They're from 1943 to the Bridge Too Far campaign. That's their leaving point. Once they've gone to that particular one, Operation Market Garden, they don't come back. But it's still 9 months when they are as a unit in one place, and therefore their legacy survives. When we're doing this field work, we have our own little band of brothers and sisters identity. We have the Dig T-shirt, always an essential piece of fine couture. This is the Mark I with the Ace of Spades on the back, which was the symbol of Easy Company. And it's always great on dig days that we're able to show these particular things with the team in the background. You can see a lot of people working and me talking in most of these photographs, which is, they do say the camera never lies. I said finds are a key thing. And at the end of the first year, we were able to show a lot of finds. And this kept our wonderful finds team very busy, but it was a precursor to being even busier in succeeding years. But it gave us a really wonderful social history. We've talked about these 9 months in the hut, but that field has been used for, well, millennia. You've got wonderful archaeology in your heritage centre, bring a prehistorian, things like the Aldbourne Cup, and just can't fail to excite. But it goes right up. Archaeology and history can start yesterday. It doesn't have to be particularly old, because it is just about people. The bottom right image, not maybe particularly easy for you all to see there, but that was in our first year, really good. That was a series of crisp packets. Believe it or not, they are older than me. Hard to think of, but they're older than me. There's a pre-decimalization, a lot of those crisp packets. And it was great when we're showing the local kids round about their environmental messages, about how this plastic will survive in the ground forever. So that was a great thing. That had been pushed up and covered by the soil when they were leveling the pitches. You'll also notice in the bottom row, well, second from the right, there are toy cars, and then just a few images along, there are marbles. And that's because these huts at the end of the First World War, when the Americans and the British had left, had been utilized by local people. I think they were known colloquially as squatters, and that's whose houses had been bombed out in the big cities and the towns, and they were allocated these particular structures prior to getting council housing. Ethel, who used to live in the village and was still here when we started the project, could recall this vividly. And that's a wonderful piece of the social history of Aldbourne. As I said, the Americans are here for a comparatively short period of the millennia of existence of Aldbourne, no matter how important that 9 months was. The fact that you've got stuff relating to after the use of these buildings, I think, is important. But of course, the key thing from my point of view and the team was to find traces of the American presence, and especially the paratroopers. Well, each year we've been pretty fortunate. So year one, a lot of the things on the right, we found these are clips for the Garand ammunition. They hold 8 rounds of American rifle ammunition. There's a pristine one given by our armorer, Mark Kahn, as to show what they should have looked like if they weren't rusty and left in the ground for 80 years. And then the 2 ones you can see there are ones that we found on your sports pictures. And we've had, I don't know how many, we've had quite a few of these over the years that are now in the heritage centres. Those are from an American rifle. In the middle, bits of a parachute. So that's also a reserve parachute. That was a fantastic find around the back of the structure we looked at. We also found silk stockings. So either the Hearts and Minds campaign was going well, or they had Royal Marines in. It's a joke for anyone in the military. So I mean, we know the Hearts and Minds campaign did go pretty well. Obviously, GI babies, and the fact that we put this brand new floor on your hall because they wore it out with the dances in the 40s. The image on the left is an exemplar of board soldier being a dangerous thing and inventive. It's a threepenny bit, British coin, which has a hole right through the middle of it, into which an American bullet fits perfectly. Now, there's no sniper in the world that is that good. So we're pretty convinced said soldier has, in a bored moment, put the coin on top of his rifle and fired it. I personally would have read a book, but nonetheless, that's an example of the sorts of monkey business that can potentially go on. Our star find, of course, in year one was this. We get excited by rust, and this is actually a top-level piece of rust. If you're looking for American paratroopers, this is a parachute handle. Still got some of the red paint on. It's just been recently conserved by Pietro, one of our top conservators. That's in the Heritage Centre. So that's an emergency pull as well. The paratroopers, when they jump out of these aircraft on D-Day, they're on what's called a static line. So their main parachute is operated by basically a strap that attaches to the airframe, so it's pulled automatically. If that thing's been used, that's your emergency handle. Now, why is it in the hut? Is it a souvenir of D-Day when they came back? This thing saved my life. Is it something they just tried out in practice? Was it a prank? Someone pulled it in the hut? We'll never know. We'll never know. But palpably, it is a link to those American soldiers and their presence here in Aldbourne. And I think a really important part of archaeology and history. Not everyone agreed. Yeah, it's not entirely true, but Alice had just had the Staffordshire hoard on the table of garnet and gold and jewelry from the 7th century, and I covered it with a pair of manky stockings, a load of rust, and a tin of bully beef or two. So we did manage to get it onto Digging for Britain, and that was really important, part of their D-Day or their Second World War commemorative thing. So I thought that was a good thing to have. She did too. She posed for that. The other key thing I think is when we talk about the benefits of doing archaeology. If you think of a Venn diagram, there are various things that work. Some people like working in the finds area. Some like doing surveying. Some like metal detecting. Some like digging. Some like the social aspects in the evening. The key thing in the middle of that Venn diagram, I think, is friendship. And archaeology facilitates that. I was going to say in spades, but you know what I mean. The fact we're able to sit around a campfire to chat about things, to maybe what's called decompress, and you're doing it on the site used by those Americans that have had maybe similar hopes and fears 80 years before, I think is quite a powerful thing. So usually when the civvies have gone to bed or to their tent, then you get the chat really going between the various people about, were you in this place? Did you do that? And what your experiences were. And I think that is quite a cathartic and powerful thing. And the television program came out, gave us some really good results. So this is sitting on Daz's vehicle here. You've got Roger Day's helmet that was actually used by a member of Easy Company on D-Day. That dent in it is a bullet strike on D-Day. He's not donated it to me yet, but we're working on it. But the key thing there is Switzy the monkey. So that's a little mascot. Two of the young lads that lived in the village with their aunt. No, it was their mum, wasn't it? Time of the war. Mum. Was sort of adopted by many of the Americans, and one of the lieutenants struck up quite a friendship with their mum, and they got this Switzy the monkey was given 2 little badges, and this was given to the monkey, and you can see the airborne badge, the screaming eagle, on his jumper. And on his little waistcoat, he's got an airborne thing. And that was given by a member of Easy Company. It's technically, if you put a financial value, it's worth a fortune. But for him, it's priceless. It's that their memories. And in the jacket pocket of the monkey, he's got the obituary from the Times, I think it is, of Dick Winters, the commanding officer. What an extraordinary thing. And this story only came about because of the programme showing the excavations at Aldbourne. And you're able to build up, as a result of that, really quite fabulous stories, which will make the ultimate publication. It's not all work on the sites. We try and reconstruct some of the photographs. On the right, on the left, you've got the chap sitting on the seat of the bike is Forrest Guth, one of the big names of Easy Company, and he did come back to Aldbourne. He certainly writes about it in his book about his service. So he's in front of the hut on the left and the right. We've had a look at. So again, we can geolocate that photograph. We can place the hut in the background, and we can get some of our veterans to reconstruct that magical moment on the bicycle. And so you've got an Australian soldier and an American airman reconstructing that for us. And it is now a multinational excavation. We started off with the Brits, and now we've moved to working with other nations as well. Forrest Guth is the individual there on the left. That photograph was taken on the morning of D-Day. Guth is one of the first ones in. I believe that is in a place called Saint-Marie-de-Mont, which was the first target for the Easy Company paratroopers prior to going through Carentan and going through various other locations in preparation to taking out German positions that were jeopardizing the landings on Utah Beach. So there's Guth. He's not featured in the television series, even though he does the whole thing. And the reason being is Tom Hanks, one of the producers, thought that everyone was going to think it was Forrest Gump. Astonishing. So he does all this, but he does come back. He did like lardy cake, definitely. He mentions it. So our next foray was to try and find that hut that Forrest Guth and various others like Ed Tipper are photographed in front of. So you can see we're now to the left of the football goalpost. It's the same geophysics. The sergeant's hut's the top right again. So the one in the red rectangle. And again, you've got these big dots illustrating where we thought quite probably there were going to be those post pads. 2019 dig a little bit, and in 2022, of course, we've had COVID in the meanwhile. So we haven't technically had COVID. Everyone has experienced the COVID shutdown in the time. So we had a couple of fallow years. So we excavated a trench around that particular hut. We laid out a grid to do some metal detecting. And the results were in many ways very similar to our first year, with the big post pads in the corners of the building. The post pads weren't all there. I think some of them have been tipped and moved by the grading machines when they're making the football pitch, but you can still see the main format. This is the road runs along here. That's the back door of the hut. You've got the front door. The two pads are missing. If you can all make out those white lolly sticks on the right, each one of those is a find, a metal detecting find. So you can imagine the joy on the finds team when they come out and see that, thinking that's going to be hitting them very, very shortly. We do metal detect the whole site as well as excavating archaeologically, just to make sure we're missing very little, if anything. And we record all the post pads in situ with the forensic numbers, just makes the reporting a lot easier. We know the configuration of the pads, and they're exactly the same. Concrete pads with a metal spike, tar paper adhering to them. There is a degree of service trenching to go with it. You've got these rather wonderful sewage pipes that Cassie seems to be an expert in finding. And lots of these drainage pipes interlinked. We've had some good runs of those. So you can see the structure, even though the whole thing has been leveled, there are the post pads. You're getting fixtures and fittings from windows and bits of corrugated iron. You're getting the drain pipes. You're getting all the relic remnants of those hut features. This is the first bit of corrugated iron we had. Not everyone gets excited by corrugated iron. If I put that on eBay and said, there's a piece of corrugated iron, you might get £1 for it from somebody who's just given up the will to live, effectively, just buy anything. If I said that's a piece of corrugated iron from one of the huts used by Easy Company, you could add several noughts onto it, quite a few noughts. And that's just been pushed down and part of the demolition of the structure, knocked backwards and then flattened. So that was the first, I think, piece of corrugated iron we found. This is the back door of the hut. Those two pads are the back door. So it's just been pushed down and flattened. Not far from it, we found a key and an escutcheon for a keyhole. Sadly, the two don't fit, so they're not connected at all, but they were found very, very close to one another. And with the metal detecting survey, what we tried to do is do small openings up to lift the find, geolocate it with GPS, bagging it and get it finds recorded. If it gave a really big signal, then we open it up a little bit more. And this is what we were finding along the halfway line where I showed you those Fox Company buildings were. Now, it looks like the Fox Company buildings may have been a little bit more substantial, using brick surrounds with the same pads, but made of brick and with flint and a metal spike in the middle. So slightly different constructional style. And then if you read the book about Fox Company, because some of them do write one in the end, they do say that the weather was so wet, and I don't know how the pitch is looking at the moment, whether it's boggy, I'd imagine it probably is. They're putting these brick surrounds in to try and alleviate some of the wetness encountered on that field. They also talk about painting the insides of the huts. And I'm pretty sure it's not a Farrow and Ball color scheme, because they talk about whorehouse red being one of them. I wouldn't know whether that's accurate or whether they are painted that color, wouldn't they? But that's one of the things they talk about. Sadly, we haven't found any red paint at all. Would have been quite funny. And the site lends itself so well to ancillary elements, and it's really important that we find things to do in our evenings here. So you've probably seen us wandering around the village. Sometimes we have jeeps. You've seen a couple of World War II and indeed later jeeps bombing around the areas. Neil's lent us his truck periodically, or driven us in his truck around the villages, just to add to that overall experience for all the participants involved. And the other, just weird and wonderful in many ways, is meeting many of the actors. Of course, none of the veterans of Easy Company are alive these days, but lots of the actors that played them in the TV series and indeed met them are. So here's Doc Rowe. This is Shane, you can see on the right, and this is him in the Bastogne episode where he's the main character. A lot of the American tour groups that come to your village and look round this key part of the formation of Easy Company do so with one of the actors guiding them round. So you've got Shane here, Tim on the right, Tim Matthews, whose character is killed in the Ardennes forest, but he is in fine fettle. And Rick, who plays Harry Welsh, who lived above the post office, his character, they've also come and been great denizens on the site, and they're always pestered by Big Jack. Big Jack, one of our vets, is a massive fan of Band of Brothers. He always has been. So you will never see an actor without Big Jack in the background. And I'm hoping he's watching this. And that's also great on the open day. So people, we try and do an open day every year. So the Cubs can visit it, the school kids can visit it, or you can visit it, and people from actually quite a distance can come and see what we're finding, because that's a really key thing about archaeology is showing the community exactly what we've done. So Anne from the Finds tent, so she used to be an engineer on Chinooks, is now our finds lead, and she's showing the various discoveries that were made in that particular year. So I told you year one was pretty good on finds. Year two wasn't bad. Look at that lot. I mean, that's an absolute nightmare to conserve and to record, but in terms of excitement, fabulous. I think one of my favorite things wasn't military. It's a little pig from a kid's toy farm. And I think it's a lovely thing. Children are underrepresented in the archaeological record. We quite often think about things being maybe ritual or votive or something, but kids had toys to play with in the past. Luckily, we can say that's a kid's toy, and that was from within one of the huts. So I'm really thinking that, again, it's like those marbles or toy car. That little pig was being played with by a kid many years ago. Oh, it's a lovely find. But we are getting a lot of military things. You get salts bottles. We always find, some glassware. We've had Brill cream, seems quite popular. The salts bottle, the British shaving brush. It says on it, free from anthrax. I don't know about you, but I always insist that my razor is free from anthrax. Try and go into Boots and ask for that. Have you got any of those free from anthrax things? Well, it's quite heartening, isn't it? Free from anthrax. I mean, yeah, that was making thinking, oh my God, what might have anthrax? Luckily, we had people who are familiar with Porton Down on site, so we knew that if there was anthrax, we knew how to deal with it properly. And then you're getting things like shaving cream, luckily also, I imagine, free from anthrax as well. But it has the writing still surviving on it. So you're getting all those bits about life. And that's what you're looking at with Aldbourne. It's the military training, but it's about living. It's about how you form your unit, how you form unit cohesion, how you learn those lessons you're going to need in theatre. But it is about your day-to-day life, the humdrum before the maelstrom. A wooden handled penknife was quite fun. We've always wanted to find American, but we've also tried to find some British stuff because the Brits were here before the Americans. And this was our first real evidence of British. This is a 303 charge. This is from a British rifle. it would have held 5 rounds to start with, but we've got 4 of them. The reason they're broken is they've been made safe effectively by our armourer. So that's a British find that was found in one of the trenches. But we are now back to the American. So here's AD modelling the Mark II T-shirt. You'll notice that's the grey one with the parachute logo. He's holding one of the American dress badges. You'll see the eagle symbol on it. You'll get every presidential address will have that symbol behind them. So palpably American. And then we're finding things like a Zippo lighter. That's the top of a grenade. It's a smoke grenade. One things I thought maybe one day in the future we'll be able to do is to build up a sort of a mannequin of an American soldier with all the bits we found that relates to an American soldier. Well, that's a smoke grenade they've got from war and the webbing harnesses. A bus token. And it says good for one fare. And that's from the Howard Bus Line, Inc., which is from Atlanta, Georgia. The main jump school, the first training sessions they do in America is in Toccoa, also in Georgia. So this is presumably a paratrooper who's had a token for a day off, day of R&R in Atlanta. He's not used all of his bus tokens, so he's put it in his pocket. When he goes back to America, he'll be able to use it, except he won't because he's left it on the football pitch at Aldbourne. But a really nice, very human thing. AD's button, and this is all post cleaning and cataloging. So here you go, that's the button with the American eagle on. Really quite smart. We've had a lot of those now. And we've also had the fixtures and fittings for American harnesses from the webbing that those soldiers wore. Hopefully you're all familiar with these now. So those are Garand clips. Again, quite a few of those. It was difficult to work out what our best find was in year 2, because we had a lot that I thought were pretty spectacular. This one got everyone excited. I didn't know what it was, but we had AD and Jack knew what this was straight away. It's an item that was only ever used on one day in history. It's an item made for one day in history. And there can't be many things like that that's manufactured just for one instance. This was issued to American paratroopers at a pottery airfield in Exeter, which is where Easy Company flew from on the morning of the 6th of June. They flew out on the 5th of June, 6th of June, going out into Normandy for D-Day. And this was issued to them to identify friend and foe. It's a clicker, a cricket. So one click will say you're an American soldier, and the response is meant to be 2 clicks to show there's a friend nearby. Made by the company Acme, which I thought only made things for Wile E. Coyote, but clearly not. So Acme, it's an Acme clicker. Acme, the company, still exists, and we're very, very excited by these because they are incredibly rare. If you've seen the film The Longest Day, you've seen that? So you see the American clicks, and then he hears 2 clicks, and he says, hey, I'm here, and he gets shot. And then you see the German walking off and cocking his rifle, which makes 2 clicks, exactly the same. Absolute nonsense, but that's what it's shown in the film. And even on the Band of Brothers thing, you see them using the clickers. So that was issued on D-Day. It's only a one chance piece of kit because the Germans are wise to it after D-Day, so you can't ever use it again. So presumably this has been brought back by one of the surviving paratroopers, and of course they take a lot of casualties, which is very movingly depicted in the TV series when they come back to Aldbourne. So I guess it's just been dropped, lost, discarded in one of the huts in Aldbourne as this person has survived D-Day. So it's a D-Day item, and it's been held by a survivor. So that we thought was going to be our best find. Very difficult to beat that, but we did. I say it's not like doing prehistory, where you might get a find that you can say, this piece of pot went into the ground in about 2000 BC, plus or minus 500 years. This, you can say when it went into the ground, who owned it, what he looked like, just about everything. The 20th century archaeology is phenomenal. This is a dog tag, and it's an identity tag used by a member of the 101st Airborne that we found on the football pitch. I will read it out, although you can probably see it yourself. It's from a chap called Richard Blake, Richard A. Blake. Underneath is his service number, so that's his unique military number for the American Armed Forces. You have then the letters T, 43, 44. So he's had a tetanus jab that's valid for 43 and 44, perfect for D-Day. Then he has A, so he's blood type A. And then below the hole is a C. He's a Catholic. All that information from a 4 centimeter long disc of metal. Quite extraordinary. And it's pristine. absolutely pristine. So this was when we found this, we couldn't quite believe. Then Paul found this with his metal detector. The other thing is with Google, etc., you're in the field, and within seconds, somebody's got a photograph of him. That you can connect a person to a find to Aldbourne from the Second World War within seconds. So that's Richard. He's a member of Able Company. We didn't know Able Company was in that field. No reason why they shouldn't be. But he's in the 1st Battalion of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, Able Company. Richard Blake drops in on Normandy on the 6th of June on D-Day as a 21-year-old. I don't know about you. I was doing nothing responsible at the age of 21. But yeah, he's a D-Day veteran. He comes back to Aldbourne, having survived D-Day, and then he is deployed on Operation Market Garden, the Bridge Too Far campaign, when they're supporting British paratroopers. And he gets a very bad hand injury. As a result, he's medically discharged from the American military, but survives the war and lives a good old life. So we thought, okay, so we've had a clicker, we've now had a dog tag, we can more or less close the sighting because we're never going to beat that. And then Cassie shouts, "Oh, I've got something." And at this point, I thought I was suspicious. I thought, somebody's putting funny things into the ground, and I don't quite believe it. But it was true. We had another dog tag. This was another American dog tag, as you can see, and it says Carl F. Fenstermacher. And then his service number, his tetanus number, his blood type O, and underneath the hole, you can see P. He's a Protestant. Well, Karl Fenstermacher, it does sound quite a German name. He's Pennsylvania Deutsch. He's one of many Pennsylvanians that join Easy Company, and he is in Easy Company. And you think Dick Winters was from Pennsylvania, Bill Garnier, Wild Bill, was from Pennsylvania. Lots of them came from there. Forrest Guth was from Pennsylvania. In fact, Fenstermacher was quite good friends with Forrest Guth, the chap I showed you on the bike. They sign up for the war from the shipyards in Philadelphia, and they do it because it's slightly more pay than a standard infantryman. Clearly, it wasn't dangerous enough being in the infantry, so they're paratroopers. And for Carl, clearly being a paratrooper wasn't dangerous enough because he becomes one of the pathfinders. So he drops in before the paratroopers to mark out the jump zones with signaling equipment or with flares, things like that. So he jumps in before. He's also the only 3-star jumper of Easy Company, so does 3 jumps, the only person to do that. Lewis Nixon does do 3 jumps, but one of them is not with Easy Company. I say he does 3 jumps. In fact, his first jump is unsuccessful. On the morning of D-Day, his Dakota is brought down into the English Channel. So he's in the sea and he sees a naval vessel coming towards him off the French coast. So he thinks it's going to be the German Navy. He's German speaking, so he hails them in German. And it promptly turns out it's the Royal Navy. So he's briefly arrested as a spy, and he has to land with the infantry on D-Day. So he gets through D-Day, he comes back to Aldbourne, he then goes to Operation Market Garden, and he survives that. He then comes back, that's the end of his tenure in Aldbourne. He then does a 3rd jump into Bastogne during the winter of 1944-5, when they are supposedly surrounded, the 101st Airborne in the Ardennes Forest, the Battle of the Bulge. He's one of only 20 men to jump in to Bastogne before the relief. Quite astonishing. And he gets through that without a scratch. But what does for him is, because he's a German speaker, he is utilized as a translator when the American army encounters some huge encampment in the woods, in the clearance in the woods, and he goes through. And the commanding officer is a chap called Ed Shames, who was in Fox, but then went into Easy Company. And Shames says he took Fenstermacher as a German speaker. We went into there, and they see this apocalyptic scene. And he has to translate everything that's going on. What they found is Dachau. And so Fenstermacher is talking to Shames about what the inmates' experiences have been, what's going on, all that horror. He's the first on the scene and is translating it to the Americans, and as a result never really recovers, according to his colleagues. He wasn't able to hold down a job at the end of the war, and didn't go to army reunions, and he dies relatively young in the 1980s. And that is a really salutary warning, I think, in many ways, that we can deal maybe with physical wounds, but the mental challenges are huge. And that's one of the things maybe we're trying to deal with on this archaeological program of Ott Nightingale, is to try and, I don't know, in a very small way, to assist those who've gone through a 21st century experience that Cole had to go through in the Second World War. So why is his dog tag in a field in Aldbourne? Well, possibly because they got his middle name wrong. He's got Carl F. Fenstermaker. His real name was Carl L. Fenstermaker. Has he bent it, chucked it away, lost it? Again, we'll never know. But that was found in the fields of the football pitches. Very, very poignant. That's Carl on the left in his jump school training in Toccoa in Georgia. Maybe he lost the token, who knows? That's him on the left. You can see his emergency parachute of the red pool would be there. And the guy two along is Forrest Guth, chap on the bike. And that's the Pathfinders. There were only two Pathfinders of Easy Company. That famous unit only had two Pathfinders, the kind of the creme de la creme. And Carl was one of them. He's the chap holding the Tommy gun below the Dakota. Second from the right for those watching online. So that was the story up to 2023. I'm losing track. 2023. Can you hear now? Yeah, we good? Okay, so this is a much shorter bit, Janine, just so you know. So 2024 we're now up to, aren't we? We've looked at the majority of the huts on the football pitch. So now you've got a superimposition of the geophysical survey that you've now seen a lot of. The Red Cross building, actually, interestingly enough, on the top right, you can now see is camouflaged. So it's a slightly different photo, but you can see the camouflage paint on top of the hut. I'm not sure how effective that would have been. You know, pilots amongst you might be able to say it does fairly. And you can make out the two huts either side of the football goalposts. We excavated we haven't excavated the yellow one. That is a potential one that might be looked at some point. The red one was the one we have looked at. And this was done, we looked at these huts with various people. We've had we had the Digging for Britain coverage. You probably saw we had a time team or two, and we had Dan Snow. So we managed to hit most of the televisual archaeologists. The excavation we did of that particular one was very effective. No, we are at 2023. I'm going mad. This is 23. So this is I think this looks like a painting. This one, it's great. The borders are perfect because of Dave Sabin's wonderful geophysical survey placing. We just say at the start of the dig, give me the corners of the trench and peg out where you think the hut is. And he's always absolutely bang on, which makes my job an absolute dream. But this one, you can see the post pads again, the concrete pads forming a line of the building. You see the scale in the middle. That's a 2 meter scale that gives you the dimensions. At the top of the trench, just above the white pads, you can see a lateral darker splodge, and that's basically the drainage of the huts. We've had some with concrete, with ceramic drainage channels, as you've seen before, and we've got others that are just simply, I think, cuts in the ground. I don't think necessarily the ceramic pipes have been removed. It's possible, but you've got there the relic bits where the drainage comes from the water from the roof. At the front, on the far right, you can see that the entrance doorposts have been removed, but the black splodges where they lay are still there. So you've got the two corner splodges of the pads at the front are in place. That's an Easy Company building. It seems to be the Easy Company buildings have the concrete pads, and Fox Company might be slightly different. So we tried a different technique. And this is using ground penetrating radar. And what that does is it basically takes little time slices with the radar through the depth of the soil, and you can do a printout of different depths. So I can say what does it look like 10 centimeters down, or 20 centimeters down, or 30 centimeters down, and it gives you different grades within that. So the archaeology, all the different colors are bits of archaeology, possible post pads, the little red blobs. The thing that looks like botulism in the middle of the image there, we thought was quite intriguing because that's right in the middle of a hut. And this is one of the ones supposedly used by Fox Company, the other company associated with Easy in this field from that veteran sketch. So if it's a floor that has all sorts of potential with stuff stuck into it, or a sealed horizon, I'd love to be able to attribute one particular building to one particular unit based on the archaeology of the finds rather than just a sketch map. And sadly, by this point, we haven't got any of that data, but that was promising. So we thought there might be a floor level within that. Judging from those little keyhole surgery elements we had, there were bits of brick. So there's possibly that element from the written accounts we had of Fox Company having brick built structures. And then there was that hope of red paint. We don't need to describe it, but possible red paint within the building. So we stripped that rectangle and did indeed find a different sort of footing of the hut. So this is as per the keyhole surgery work we did the year before, but with the whole area stripped down. In the top left corner, you can see the missing bricks. So that's effectively where the pitch has been graded. This is on the halfway line today. So you've got a load of brick structures. Perfect if you want a time waste towards the end of the game. You can claim you hurt your knee on a Second World War building. And instead of having the concrete pads, you've got the brick equivalent. So you'll see a little brick. It's almost like a dental area going in, like little teeth going through, and then there's a concrete or flint piece within it, and often a metal spike. So it's the same but replicated within brick rather than stone. You can also hopefully can see that the colour is slightly different in the middle. You've got more of a grey splodge above the red and white scale and more of a yellowy brown to the left. That's because there's like a clinker flooring. So a lot of the forming paths across the football pitch in what was the old hut gap had a base layer of sort of things that you get in a furnace, you know, the clinker and slag from inside a furnace, and that's forming a base layer of your paths. Allegedly, it had concrete slabs placed on top of them, and we have read somewhere that some of the concrete pads were chucked into the village pond. I've not seen any evidence for that, but yeah, allegedly that's possibly where they went. So all we're finding is the substrate of the floor levels. And we get that for the pathways, and we also got that within the building. So that lovely potential floor was, in fact, it was a floor, but it's just a base layer, so it's not sealing anything. But a really nice, clean piece of work that was. And the finds again. It's getting silly now, isn't it? That's 1 year again of finds. Huge numbers, and each year seems to produce more, whether that's because we're more proficient or simply we're just lucky or unlucky. A vast amount of finds, and again, a lot of those linked to the American presence in that field. The buckle you can see there is from an American set of boots. We've had a couple of these buckles, still got the original leather on the tongue of the buckle there, and those were made, they're stamped. They're made in Providence, Rhode Island, so they're made on the east of the States. So again, it's another thing we can build up in our mannequin of American militaria. What was really good about that particular year was that we were able to work alongside American servicemen and women and veterans as well. So we had some that are in the active service bases on the east of England. You think of places like Molesworth and the American Air Force bases out on the east, like Lake and Heath, they were taking part. But we had two guys that came over from the States that took part in the excavation. So you've got Pat here, who's a veteran of the 101st Airborne. So his predecessors 80 years before were sat in your football pitch. And we brought Pat here, and he's chatting away with, you probably recognise Sir Tony Robinson from the time team's perspective. And that was great to be able to see that we've got Brits working alongside Americans just as they did in the 1940s. And Pat had served alongside British units or aware of British units when he was in Afghanistan. And that sort of camaraderie that replicates in the archaeology team is very moving to see. And it's it's fantastic. So Pat has taken part in all the excavation. We took, or certainly the American guys on this took this very seriously. They took part in absolutely everything. It was the year of the coronation. So for them, a very strange experience, them having quite traitorously, any of you lot listening in the States, having got rid of our monarchy, an absolutely mad decision, but there you go. So them having to witness the coronation and the kind of huge splendor, but they really got into the spirit of it all. this is Ken, ex of the 10th Mountain Division, with his Union bowler hat on, taking over, working in the Sports and Social Club, quite dramatically, really getting into it. And there with, I believe that's probably Aspel's, given it's Ken, and that was wonderful that we were able to share a really very British experience. And you read the accounts of the Americans in the 1940s, and their sort of view of sort of otherworldliness of being in Britain. Certainly when David Kenyon Webster, one of the members of Easy Company, writes about coming to England, because they land in Liverpool and they get the train presumably down here. And when they wake up in the stable blocks around the church, he said he felt he was in a Hollywood film set because it was so beautiful and so otherworldly of oldie England. Well, they went here for a coronation. So we're able to provide a very British experience for our American, very close friends that come and dig with us. So fabulous finds. Again, this thing has gone through the ringer about what we think it is. We know the thing is a Shippen's meat paste jar, right? So we're happy with that. We know what that is. Now this wheel, initially we thought, wouldn't it be nice if that was Forrest Gust's bike? Just after the photographs, he'd slung it in a hole. Well, it's obviously not going to be that. Could it be just a normal bike wheel, but there's no braking mechanisms or anything like that? I think, I could be corrected by one of the team, but I think we're still working on the assumption that this might be from something like an airborne cart, a Cushman cart, used by Brits and Americans. But there are pictures of American forces when they jump out, they have these carts, they put equipment in them and gives them a lot more mobility. And if you go to Duxford, there's a display of the airborne forces there, and there is a cart in there, which the wheel is pretty much identical. So we can't say there's no absolutely defining thing. There's the right number of spokes, but we can't say 100% that it is a Cushman cart, but we're hopeful. The Airborne Museum at Middle Wallop has something that looks completely different, but there are different parts of this. So we're going with Cushman cart at the moment. Wonderfully, the Heritage Centre was given an old sign saying "Way In," I think it was, written on it, kind of a military sign, but on the back it was an old cart, Cushman cart box. So I don't know. That's what we're working with. We're going with Cushman cart, in which case that's a very rare find, and it's much more exciting than being a discarded bike wheel. So we're going to go with that. And the key thing I think is it facilitates the archaeology. This facilitates commemoration. We were just chatting in the break about how people in the States have seen the Time Team program or Digging for Britain, and it's brought all these little nuggets of information. And also you in the room, I've been hearing stories of the person that made the lardy cake or gave haircuts just from the knowledge in this room, and being able to facilitate that sort of thing, trying to draw it together, hopefully for the Heritage Centre to make use of, and the camaraderie, you can see Brits and Americans and our dig team and time team, being able to share thoughts and memories from their parts on the dig, and also those memories from 1940s. We've had both of our years with the American colleagues being able to do a sort of ceremony out, and I know that this is your memorial hall with the poppy wreaths, but be able to just put a little wreath up on that on the village green is an important thing as part of our group. You can see the time team being a part of that. That was 2023. So 2024, last spring, we go back to this sketch produced by that veteran with the Quonset huts of Easy Company and the Quonset huts of Fox Company on the drill field or your football pitch. Now, from all the air photographs, we know that there were huts between them. So where the road with now the army trucks on, we've excavated. Then the ones right in the middle of the picture, the single hut, that was where the Fox Company building with the brick footings was. But you'll notice there are, on the top right of the image, there are huts between them. So there's ones that are perpendicular running with the embankment up towards the tennis court. So there are huts there. We don't know on the sketch map who they thought, whether it was Easy or Fox Company. We don't know anything about it. Well, again, there are photographs of people. Carwood Lipton again. So here with this, something with the Tommy gun by the look of it. He's standing on looks like he's about to take a penalty actually. You've got the 2022 hut we excavated just behind him to his right as we're looking at it, and our hut at perpendicular was the target for last year. So we've got fantastic photographic evidence that we can geolocate. And you can put a lot of people in the hole. And now you can see the Mark III and Mark IV t-shirts. Mark III being the time team one on the left, and then the Mark IV being the paratrooper colour on the right. So you can date almost the photograph from the t-shirts. My t-shirts are always so old, that doesn't really work. So we've got a mixture of, we've stripped the area with the turf cutter. We've gone down into the level we wanted to be at. We're looking for all the post pads, and the individuals here are standing and excavating right in the middle of the structure during, I think it's during one of our open days rather than this just being a very busy dig day. And you can see we're metal detecting at the same time. Rather splendidly, this was the year that we had all of the post pads. It's the first time that we've had all the post pads in the right area. It would have been an incredibly neat excavation trench, but I made the very lazy decision that we've got all the pads, we don't need to dig any more on the right hand side of that image. So you've got all the post pads, everything inside there is the interior of the structure, and what looks like a grave in the middle. It isn't a grave, but it does look that sort of shape. So that's the hut between the lines of Easy and Fox Company. You've got the big corner pads of the Nissen hut, and every other hut is every other pad is still in place. So there you go. Those are all the huts with their numbering. Now the bit that I showed you that looked almost like a grave was in fact a piece of corrugated iron. Now you do need to get excited about corrugated iron at times, and this is one of them. So this is one of the existing bits of that hut that we're trying to investigate, and the really exciting bit, well, I think it's exciting, it's just behind where Jason, who's an Air Force veteran, is excavating. You can see that hole. We think that's the hole for the chimney. So that is actually a very important part of the structure of this hut. It's the first one that we've had in situ, so we've had a bit pushed out the back door, but this is, we think, part of the superstructure of the hut that's just been knocked down, and when the picture's been levelled, they've left that in situation, which is great. The other cool thing is that anything underneath it is in the destruction layer of the hut, so it's from within the hut, a sealed horizon, so it could give us good information about who was there. So when we talk about not being bothered about corrugated iron, I've never seen more effort expended on one piece of Wrigley tin ever, including one of the live members of the 101st helping with Torrin helping out in full kit to give the experiential feeling of it. So we worked out a strategy how we were going to lift this without breaking it, and I presume it's not broken since, which is effectively just gingerly taking the edges off and putting reinforcement bars along the entire length of it and then lifting it. And it did work, And there were some really good finds and around. So I'm hoping, top right, you all now recognise this American clip from a Garand rifle. We have got cord, well, we thought that might be paracord, but it may not be. American knives from a mess kit, and they're all stamped with US on, so they're definitely American. You have bits of a razor, again, no anthrax. A thing that looks like an annular brooch, could be a lovely Iron Age brooch, except it's part of a grenade. It's the pin of a grenade, really important, but it's the pin of a grenade. Some of you will probably recognise that curved thing. It is a Bren gun. It's a Bren gun magazine. So that's from a British Army weapon. And we did find a lot of German equipment or bits of munitions on the excavation site, whether that's through souveniring or the Americans bringing stuff back to test the enemy's equipment and its effectiveness. I don't think they're doing that with the Bren gun. It's an effective piece of kit, but I don't think that's what we're particularly looking at here. I think that was from the British presence. So here's the picture. Now this was found, the canteen you see there on the left was found metal detecting one of the bungalows on the edge of the football pitch. So really lovely quality. We haven't had one of those before, so that'll go nicely. And again, it's date stamped. I think it says what's in 1943. Yeah, on it.
We've had quite a few of the buffalo nickels as well now. I think it's about 3 of them, and you can see the 5 cents, see the buffalo on it, and then the head of the Native American on the other side. And those are apparently quite collectible things, but again, very, very American. So we had a few of those last year. There's our knives. There's a US issued mesh knife. See the US written on it, on the Bakelite handle. I've got 2 of those. And then the blade of a fighting knife. So that's a knife on the right. That's a knife that would have been, strapped to the leg of a paratrooper. I think it's probably the first weapon we've had connected with the paratroopers. Close up of the grenade ring or the Iron Age brooch, depending on what you want it to be. And then parts of a smoke grenade handle. So we've had a couple of bits of smoke grenade. This is an American issue piece of kit, so that is just a handle, flick it off, and you fill your hut with smoke if that's your game. More webbing, lots of webbing buckles. We said it's parachute cord. I think we're probably thinking it may not be now, but who knows? That's what was the working hypothesis on site. So the super cool thing was the really, I don't know what's going to happen with this in the museum, but I think that should be a centerpiece. Piece of corrugated iron, you could make a museum out of it, make the roof of the machine. Anyway, so that's the roof with a deliberate cut through of the chimney. But the really cool thing that was directly found by one of our vets, David, directly below it was this. It's our 3rd dog tag. And this is an early dog tag. It's curled up like one of those Roman lead curses you get in the Roman baths, isn't it? Curled up and then chucked in as a sacrifice. So why how do we know this is an early one to start with? Well, partly because it's a slightly different material. It's not like that shiny stuff you've seen with the previous 2. Partly because there's so much information on it, which they decided wasn't a good thing. So this is owned by a chap called Otto May, who was indeed in Fox Company. So we know that hut was at some point either visited or used by a chap in Fox Company. It's the first time we've been able to put a person directly in a building. So underneath Otto, as you can see there, it does say Otto May, but it's on the other side. And you've got the service number, you do have his blood type, you have his tetanus thing, but you've also got his dad's address. So Mr. May's address is there, and he's from Brooklyn in New York. And that's an early phase dog tag because the Americans soon realised that's probably not great to have the address of the person who you captured on the dog tag. And people like Lord Hawthorne were making mileage out of this by saying, oh, we know we've got your son or your husband, and he's telling us loads of stuff. And so using it for a propaganda purpose. So having that as the first phase, they discarded it. So the second one, Otto May, would have had just his service number, I'd say just his service number 10, the blood type and religion, but not his address. Now, Otto May is the chap on the image on the left. He's the one on the right. So it's the shorter individual. Otto May he's quite an old man on D-Day. He's about 27, but he gets through the entire war. He's wounded quite badly in Bastogne in the Battle of the Bulge, and that's the end, effectively, of his war. But he survives the whole war. The other beauty about this, not only can you find images of him, and you can even find how much that house in Brooklyn sold for last time. It's bonkers what you can find. Again, Giselle, who's done a lot of this brilliant work for us, traced the family, and we've had conversations with them online. That's his grandson, Brian. In the bottom image, he's holding up Otto's jump jacket with the sergeant stripes. And he's also it's not just Switzy the monkey, he's also got a Screaming Eagle patch on, so he's done well. And then you can see the decorations that Otto was awarded in the top image. That's a Purple Heart, so that's a wound medal, and a Silver Star for gallantry. The other thing that Brian said, he said, I know you're desperate to ask me what was he like, because he survives. And he said he was lovely. He was a lovely grandfather, which is always good because you don't want to hear, oh, the bloke was an idiot. But apparently he was a lovely grandfather. And that was just a really lovely, heartening story that this chap lived in your village for nine months. And it's all about community. So it's all about people, it's all about community. partly from our DIG's point of view, is that community between British and American and Australian servicemen and women from recent conflicts, but also the way that you lot have made us feel really, really welcome. So it's just been a real joy that we can welcome your school kids to the dig and show them, in that case, a bullet, tell them all about the digs, or we can show David, you can see top right, is explaining some of the finds of the excavation. I think we got John modelling the Mark 1 t-shirt, again, with all the school kids, that it's wonderful to show, and then Terry and Ethel and others in the bottom right, that we're able to share memories. I've always thought it's quite strange talking about memories to people who can remember the structures or things you're dealing with as archaeology, and they can remember them for real. I was digging a site in Poland, on the Great Escape site, digging an escape tunnel in Stalag 3 with one of the escapees. And I asked him afterwards, how does this feel? He said, I didn't know what to think about it at the start, but it's great because it continues that memory. And the more people like those youngsters at your school remember it, the more important it is. So we've had a fabulous welcome from you lot. It's great that we can share our work in a small way. We've provided members to the Morris Dance Dig team. Thank you, Carlos. More or less successfully. So making use of your wonderful hostelries, the blue board. We've even taken part in the pub quiz, sometimes successfully, it has to be added. But that's always a joy as well, to be able to do those social experiences. So a huge thanks to everyone, be it the post office, the pubs, the people that run the memorial hall where you can speak or watch the series Band of Brothers, and just being able to chat with people when they come to site and talk about what we're doing and keep the memory of those people going. I think it's really important from so many points of view. The final thing I wanted to do is to thank the DIG team, because I just sit there and watch them do all the work, and they do all the hard graft, and they are fantastic. So they come from all walks of life. You've got civilian volunteers that assist, a mixture of British, Americans, Australians, that assist, local experts, people like Roger and his friends who are based at the museum at Littlecote, will show us around. I showed you this team picture. This is only a part of the team, but I showed you this. This is a visit to the Ramsbury Brewery. So I showed you the before shot. I'm not showing you the after shot. But these guys that to me, I'm not talking to you. And so this is just a big thank you to them for all they do on these projects, because I think it's an incredibly worthwhile thing. And we do monitor the effectiveness of this for the participants, and it is pretty astonishing from a well-being perspective. I'm just going to finish with, please do go and find the time teams, I think, that are available on YouTube. It's all open source. You can see 2 of the excavations on there and find out a little bit more, if you're interested by what we've heard tonight, about what went on, and you'll see some vignettes that are quite interesting. And then, shameless plug, go and buy the book, because the book does talk about all the other digs we've done, some of them military, some of them more traditional archaeology. It talks also about the phenomenal stories of the veterans and service personnel that have taken part in these digs over the years, and just how astonishing they all are. And the other thing is, every single penny of that, every single penny, goes to military charity. It goes to SAFA, the military charity. So I can plug that shamelessly, because I'm not making a penny out of it. But it's important that we keep this thing going. And I think that we're looking at this sort of thing hopefully happening in as many locations as we can in the future, how we can facilitate it, because something that I've seen over the years is that there's a need for it in some ways. There's people that love archaeology, like history, and I think anyone with mental health challenges caused by their service, that's not going to go away any. So we're going to be also inviting, we hope, 2 Ukrainians to work with us in a site in Wales this year. And who knows, if we come back here, when we come back here, there may be another military family joining us. We shall see. So thank you for your attention, and I hope you've enjoyed it.